Can you guys hear me without the mic? I hate mics, so I prefer not to use it because I move around too much. I like people named Mike. My brother's named Mike, but you guys have a worksheet in front of you that was handed out earlier about the study that was done with Penn State. I found that interesting because I did not coordinate that with anybody before I got here, but my company actually did that study in conjunction with Penn State.
There you go.
There you go.
Keep it on?
Yeah, you want to sign yourself?
Hmm?
You touched it too long.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what you did. Well, now we're both Jim Moody. Leave it there. We'll leave it there. I wanted to show you this screenshot of that study because I want you to see how high that climbed up. I'm just going to get rid of my ergonomic software here. Bear with me. Exit Biadasz. Boom. Okay. You're not going to be able to hear the sound that goes along with this. This is on YouTube. You just type in Industrial Scientific space Penn State, and you'll find this video. But you could see the instrument climb as they agitate, and they'll go through it further, and you'll see the instrument climb even further. If you're interested, you can obviously see the way the pit's set up and where that fence is that they were attaching the instrument to. So it's fairly close to the pit, but probably at my waist height, everybody else's ankles. That was another joke. But I was impressed with how high the levels climbed at that type of distance from the agitator head itself, right? Are you breaking it?
I'm just holding it.
Okay.
I'm just sitting here, man.
All right. So I appreciate everybody that presented prior to me because they've reinforced a lot of the stuff that I talk about. And I thought about a lot of the needs that you guys have and the challenges that you guys have. And the reality is safety is not very sexy, right? You think about buying a gas detector, it's like buying tires for your pickup truck. It's not a very enticing purchase, right? So what we're trying to do as a manufacturer, Industrial Scientific, is we're trying to end death in the workplace by 2050. And we're trying to employ technologies that make it easier for you to be safe and still be productive, right? Because you still need to do your work at the end of the day. So not knowing the presentations that came before me, I laid out my agenda like this. What do you want to protect against? Because they talked about confined space entry, John did, and we talked about hydrogen sulfide detection and methane detection, that sort of thing. You need to decide that, at a minimum, what your hazards are for your applications. And then you could look at the options that are available out in the world. So all of our instruments are chirping at us because they're overdue for being calibrated, okay? So my instrument's reminding me that I should have calibrated it before I got here today. And that's probably what that device is doing as well. But here are some of the gases that you can run into. You got a more complete list from Becky earlier. Was it Becky? But, in a manure pit, hydrogen sulfide, methane, confined space entry, oxygen levels, combustible gas, those sorts of things. But then you also need to consider, hey, there are a lot of other hazards on the farm that you could protect against and make this a more valuable tool to you. Heart attacks, heat exhaustion. John talked about getting caught in machinery, right? How long can you possibly scream before you pass out from the pain, right? All things to consider, and I hate to be morbid, but it's the reality of it, right? So we're trying to, as a company, offer tools that help you become safe beyond gas detection itself, okay? So now that you've thought about those concepts, now I can talk to you about some of the tools that are available out there. We make a ton of different options. And I was talking with Steve earlier and Carmen, and we were talking about ways that you could gain access to this equipment. And there are a ton of options with that as well. do not believe that you're constrained to buying an instrument. They talked about rental. There's lease to own. There's just straight up leasing. There's subscription plans that include all the maintenance on these things. There's a lot of different things you can do, so it's worth having that conversation with your local service provider or the manufacturer and or both, so you get the whole story to understand what are the capabilities out there. Don't think it's beyond your means, okay? So let's talk about single gas instruments. Again, you're just protecting against one gas at a time. Our Tango TX1 is the world's safest single gas monitor. We developed this concept by using data from over 10,000 different sensors that are being monitored live via the internet. So we're using real-time live data as how we came up with this concept for this product. We talked earlier about bump testing and calibration. This device uses redundant sensors, that's why we call it a Tango 2, right? And it passes the information that both sensors put out through a proprietary algorithm that was written by the same guys that developed Watson, the supercomputer. Did everybody watch Jeopardy? Everybody hear of Watson? Some people know. I didn't really hear about it until I watched the episode, right? But it's basically these folks that wrote software that can outthink human beings quickly, and they're not loaded with the data. Basically, it's problem solving live. So it's artificial intelligence. That's how we came up with this algorithm. Because we have redundant sensors, we are able to revise the bump test policy on this device to bump test whenever you want, calibrate every 30 days. You talk about rental, right? You could just rent this from us or our distributors and send it back and never have to worry about buying gas for it, putting gas on it, doing that calibration process. All you need to know is to turn it on, and when it tells you to get out of Dodge, right? That's how easy we're trying to make this for folks, okay? If you were to buy this device, the list price is $265. But I would say, hey, it's not the cheapest device on the market, but it's got the best warranty. So if you're all going to purchase this, it's got a guaranteed for life on the board, which means as long as we manufacture it, it's warranted on the board, which is the most expensive component. And then the sensors are warranted for 3 years. It's got the loudest alarms of any single gas monitor in the market. We also make an accessory that clamps over the top of this called an alarm amplifier that raises the sound by 10 decibels. It's more than twice as loud. 10 decibels is logarithmic. How they measure sound is logarithmic. It's more than twice the volume by having this little dinky cover on it versus this by itself. Okay? The other thing that this device does is it designates its alarm levels based not only on the tone that the instrument's screaming at you, but it'll also show you blue and red for low alarm and red only for high alarm. So at a distance, you can look at your buddy and say, you're in high alarm, we got to get out of here. You don't need to be right on top of them, right? Here's the data that backs up the concept. And basically, we looked at 10,000 unique sensors, and we did 2.1 million bump tests to prove this. That's the data set that we use to prove this. But basically, you look at a normal single gas device, the failure rate is going to be 1 in 1,200 instruments. You employ DualSense, failure rate's 1 in $21,000, or 21,000 instruments. One was $21,000. That lets us be a lot more cost-effective device for you guys than buying a cheap throwaway device. Okay? This is also fully serviceable, so you could put sensors and batteries in this for as long as we offer them. Okay? We also have a program, this is a little bit salesy, I admit. We also have a program that if you buy this device this year, we will provide you free sensors 3 years from now at no extra charge. So you could run this device for 6 years and spend only $8 on the actual maintenance of the device itself. You still need to bump or calibrate it every 30 days if you bought it, but actually spending money on the device itself, it's only that initial cost. It takes the cost of the device down to like $45 a year to operate the device. So it's a great tool. Has full data logging like you talked about, 10-second intervals, so you could do all the data stuff that was talked about earlier. It's got a replaceable battery. So the battery is designed to run for 2 years, but after that 2 years lapses, you can throw a new battery in it. All gas detectors have heavy metals in them, so I would discourage you from buying ones that you throw away because you're not being very green, and they cost money to actually dispose of if you were to do it the right way and not just throw it in the burn bin. Right? It costs about $20 to throw this out the right way, believe it or not. So something to consider. Any questions on DualSense? Think about a jetliner. It has 2 engines. It's got 2 avionics, 2 communication systems, 2 of everything to keep that jet pretty safe. It's the same concept. You're just applying it to a gas detector. Yeah, Cliff?
When it's going to read like the H2S gas,
Mm-hmm.
will it give you the actual reading? So say you got 40, 50, stuff like that. Okay, because my son borrowed one from a neighbor.
This device or somebody else's?
No, I don't know what it was even.
Okay. Yep.
He borrowed one from a neighbor who lived from last fall. And the thing went up to 20, and it didn't do any more. And it kept beeping all the
Right.
time
So
where you were.
range is important. Some of the devices that were shown earlier have a very low range. This device is rated up, can go from 0 to 500 parts per million H2S. It can read all the way up to 500 accurately. Okay? A lot of the other manufacturers on the market can only go to 100. This can read up to 500. And that can be important, as you know. You can see levels that spike pretty high. The problem with an instrument that reads very low or doesn't have a good range is after it hits its peak, you don't know if you're at 400 or if you're at 200 or if you're at 150 or if you're at 101. You don't know if the max range is 100. And that's why you want it to read a lot higher than you need. Yeah?
I think on those, just to clarify, the maximum range that they show on the display is up to 100 with the theory that the goal is to get out.
I agree.
Not to wait.
I agree. But the instrument is not even recording above 100.
It will say over limit.
It says OR.
Yeah.
Our device will read over that to 500. And why that's important is that you were talking about data later on. You could download the data out of this device, and you know from 0 to 500, it's got a linear response, and you're getting proper data out of that instrument.
What's the
Right.
battery replacement on these costs?
$8 for a battery. It's a 2/3 triple or 2/3 AA battery that you buy Batteries Plus. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. You don't want to sit in 150 parts per million H2S, that's for sure. I know I wouldn't. But I certainly wouldn't want an instrument that only reads to like 50. And some of the devices out there only read to 50. Well, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm not sure.
I've seen those too.
Yeah. But it's important what you buy when you're spending money on this stuff. It's not the best idea to do that. So this device, $265, you get 6 years of operation, and then you got to throw a battery in it, so another $8. That's list. You could get the devices cheaper than that. I talk in MSRP like a buying a car sticker, you know. Right? Any questions on this? It's called the Tango TX1, and it's the only one on the market that uses DualSense technology. So that's your basic level of gas detection. If you're doing confined space entry, we have a device called Aventus MX4. It comes in different flavors. You got your diffusion instrument that was talked about earlier. You got your integrated pump model. And you have a slide-on pump. So if you were going down into that manure pit underneath, the ones that are actually, what would you call that? Under slatted floor, for example, you would want to sample into that space before entering, right, if you had to. And this would be a tool that you would use, or this would be a tool that you would use. Now, if you just want to detect personally, what you're being exposed to, you could wear this device. And you can see that they're not much bigger than the single gas devices that are on the market. The difference is this has a rechargeable battery and it's detecting up to 4 gases at one time. Okay? This has a 2-year bumper-to-bumper warranty, and it'll run for up to 20 hours on one charge, depending on the type of battery pack that you bought it with. Okay? We also can take alkaline batteries in this device as well. Okay? Any more questions with this device? It's a pretty basic device. It's pretty easy to use. It's just standard 4-gas device. This has a full data logger in it as well, and you can download data using a data link, a docking cradle, that sort of thing. You have more questions? Okay. And you can see I put some configurations on there for you. You know, 4-gas without a pump, 4-gas with a pump, and then 3-gas. So O2 levels, LEL levels, H2S levels. John talked about needing certain levels of oxygen for some of the sensors to work properly. That's primarily that's the primary concern is the combustible gas sensor in the device. The combustible gas sensors in these devices are based off a fire triangle. You need enough oxygen present for the sensor to work properly because it's actually burning the gas. So whenever you put a combustible or LEL sensor in a device, you also want to have an oxygen sensor in there as well. Okay. Another option for you, when I said don't think there's not options out there, is you could buy these devices factory pre-owned. So you could buy a device that was used in service before, has had a multi-point inspection from the manufacturer, and then you could buy that used. It comes with a 1-year warranty, and they're discounted heavily, like $300 to $400 off buying a brand new one. Okay? So that's an option that's out there as well. And you can get access to these through any industrial scientific distributor that has access to our equipment. So Argus, Hasco, Airgas, Grainger. I wouldn't recommend using Grainger, but Grainger. I'd recommend your local safety service supplier because they're going to be more knowledgeable, they're going to be hands-on, that sort of thing. Everybody over here kind of give me a grin when I said that. So any questions on anything I've covered up to this point? I feel like I'm going really fast. No? Okay. So the more interesting stuff is the device I'm wearing right now. And this takes safety one step further. New devices can be paired wirelessly to other devices and communicate all sorts of things. So, man down system. If I pass out and I sit dormant for a while, my instrument will go on alarm, and all the other devices that are attached to my instrument wirelessly will also go into alarm. If I push my panic button, my device will go into alarm, and my teammates will also know that as well. That's the type of device this is. It's fully waterproof, IP68. Means it's been totally dust-proof. The second digit, the 68 is the 8. That means it's fully water resistant. It's been dunk tested to 1.5 meters. Right? It's been squirted with a high-pressure hose for 30 minutes in all directions, so it's totally water resistant as you're going to get without it being a diving watch. Right? You could customize how people should be responding into these devices, right? So, you know, you always want to tell people to get out, but when your instrument's going in alarm, people start to panic, and they don't know how to respond. So you can reinforce that by having the device say evacuate on the device when it goes into alarm, right? You can see these devices are guaranteed for life on the board and have a 3-year warranty on the sensors. When I say that they're wirelessly paired, you guys saw me attach this device to that device over there, and I just attached it to John's device over here. So after John pops up, I can push my panic button, And you'll see all the way back there behind you guys that they're all communicating wirelessly. You can't ignore these things. They're that loud. I only uncovered one speaker, by the way. Right? These devices can communicate, the small ones can communicate up to 300 feet apart, line of sight. The bigger ones can communicate up to 1,000 feet line apart, or 1,000 feet apart line of sight. And if I raise it to table height, it's 1,800 feet. Right? I'll silence this panic alarm. It'll go off. It is. The other thing you could do with these devices is if, say I put one of these area devices by the pit and it starts going off and I want to go turn off that pump and I want to determine if it's safe, I can remotely peer into that device using this device. So I could actually look at the readings from this device using my instrument in front of me. So I can tell what that instrument's being exposed to at a distance. Right? It's the smallest gas detector that's on the market that can do the most sensors. So this can do up to 5 gases at one time. So some of the gases that were talked about earlier, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, carbon dioxide, and methane. This device can handle all those in one device, in this size. Okay? That device over there can also handle that as well. Okay? And you can see some of the pricing there below. This device can also be used in a dual sense configuration. If you just want just H2S and the panic button man down, you can do that with this as well. So you're more concerned about Grandpop having a heart attack on the farm than you are about him being exposed to hydrogen sulfide. I mean, that's a real hazard, right? People have heart attacks all the time. They get heat exhaustion all the time. If I pass out and there's nobody there to come pick me up, that's a problem, right? So this has that man down built into it, has a panic button built into it, right? Here are all the different sensors available in this device. And that's the Ventus Pro 5. We also make a Pro 4 that's a little bit more cost effective, but can only do up to 4 gases at one time. But it has the rest of the features are still in that device as well. So here's an example of the man down alarm. It's a 2-part alarm. I pass out, the device will start alerting locally. If I do nothing, it'll send that alarm out to my peers. And you guys saw me activate the panic button as well. Here's a startup message. So it's, hey, remember to call the fire department before your agitation process. You could program that in here so people don't forget to do that safety plan. Right? Here's that alarm action message. How to respond to that level of gas. Right? Turn on the fans. Evacuate. Right? If you're using the time-weighted average or Stell alarms, which weren't really heavily discussed today, stop work for 8 hours. Stop work for a day. Stop work and go to the hospital. Right? So you can program all that into the device so it tells you how to respond to that level of gas. So you're not guessing what to do. You're not looking at the device saying, how should I respond to this? The device tells you exactly how to respond. One of the features that you could do with this is you could tell the device who's using it, and that's what I was doing earlier with John. If I push my panic button, John would see on his device that it says Jim Moody panic. I could also drive the instrument to alarm. And you'll see that this area monitor for the guys that are here, it's going to say Jim Moody low O2. Can you see that? And the one in the back will say that as well. It knows what I'm being exposed to, and it's transmitting that to the other instruments, right? You breathe in 21, you breathe out about 16. Right? So that's how this is used. It's just a little tag that you can program using an app on your phone. I'll let that climb out. The other feature that was talked about earlier, as gas levels get back to normal, these devices will come out of alarm. Right? You could force the user to acknowledge the alarm by pressing a button too after they evacuated that gaseous area, so they acknowledge it. That's another option that's out there. Any questions on this device about the programming? It's literally touching two instruments together. Who's used picture transfer on your iPhone or Bump? It's the same technology. It's a near-field communicator built into this, near-field communicator built into that. Pair them together, and then they're talking through high-frequency radio. Yeah?
Do you have any estimate on how long the batteries, say it's 3 AA or it was, I can't remember what you said.
I was talking about instruments, different instrument earlier. So the Tango,
Yeah,
the Tango is this device. This will run for a minimum of 2 years on one battery. It's got a replaceable battery. It's 2/3 AA. You can buy it at Batteries Plus. It's not a common battery. And this will run for 2 years straight, and then you can change the battery out.
But if it's alarming often, doesn't that decrease the battery?
You're correct, it does. That estimation is based off of so many alarm events every so many weeks, that sort of thing. So it's an estimate, right? If it's in alarm 24/7, guess what? Your battery is not going to run for 2 years straight. It's actually was originally spec'd to 3 years, and then after we saw a lot of real-world use case scenarios, we reduced the spec to 2 years based off that. Yeah. This device, from 12 to 20 hours. Same thing with this device. Okay, depending on the battery pack you buy it with. These are all lithium-ion rechargeable batteries. So as soon as you're done using it, you put it right back down on a charger. It has no cell memory that you remember with the nickel cadmium, that sort of thing. Another tool that you can buy, and you could choose whether to use all this wireless stuff or not. You could buy these without the wireless, by the way. But another tool is a radius area monitor. So this is designed to be left by the pit or by the area that you're concerned about and run for the entire duration of the job. The nice thing about this is it alerts you to a hazard without you being in the hazard. With a personal monitor, you need to be in that toxic gas cloud for the instrument to react. Whereas if I have that device by the edge of the pit and gas is going near that, I'm not in harm's way. The nice thing about these devices is once they go into alarm, the display lights up and you could actually see at a distance the levels of gas without approaching the device itself. If you have more than one, you can remotely view those levels of gas using one of these or another radius device. So you don't need any extra equipment beyond the device itself, right? The runtime on that device is 7 days, and if you buy the pumped version to be used for confined space, it'll run for 3.5 days straight. It's got a 2-year warranty on that, and that's 108 dB at 1 meter. As you can see, it's as loud as a jackhammer or a rock concert, right? Big light bar, that sort of thing. There's the large display I was talking about. It's got a dynamic home screen, right? The nice thing about this is you could face the display in whatever direction you want. The gas can still migrate to the sensing area regardless of its orientation, right? So you could face it towards you, but the gas will still get where it needs to go from a detection perspective. And you can leave this outside. It's designed to be left outside. This is only designed to tolerate what you can tolerate. So if it's -20 outside, this won't like that very much, right? Because it's a small device.
So what's running that if it only can run for 7 days?
What's running it? It's got a big battery in the base.
So do you just charge it after 7?
Yeah. So if you run it all the way down to fully dead, it takes about 4 to 6 hours to get to a full charge again. Yeah. But the price goes way up, right? The more features you have, the more robust the tool is, price goes way up. So this is where it starts to look a little scary. But know that you could rent these for jobs for a week. We could also rent them for a month, right? You can lease these. You could lease to own. You can finance them. There's all sorts of options out there, right? You just need to start asking questions. I was talking to Steve earlier, right? And he was talking about nuisance alarms. And the alarms that are programmed into instruments are set pretty low, especially for the application that you guys are doing. And then there's a trade-off as to, I'm always hearing this, well, why don't you tell it, Steve? How would you phrase it? You're always hearing what, and you're always... I'm going to embarrass you. Stand up so everybody can hear you. Sorry.
Come up here, Steve.
Come on, Steve.
Come on, Steve. Come on up.
Last year, we had 2 different monitors that we were using when we pumped as well. The one thing that I noticed was they were both set to 10 ppm when the alarm would go off. It was a less dramatic alarm at 10, where between 10 and 20, I believe it was. But the problem was is that I feel that a lot of people, if they're in the 10 parts per million for, say, 8 hours a day, that alarm is going to go off for 8 hours a day. Number one, it's going to drain your battery very quickly. Number two, it's going to get annoying. And number three, people are not going to really seem to care much if they keep looking at an alarm that's showing 10 or 12. Not that that can't have any health effects on you, but it is a very, very low concentration of it. And like I said, I would guess that most people would just kind of get annoyed with it. So is there a way that you can change that on these monitors? Can you run it up to 20, say, hey?
So, yeah, so we talked about conversely, to be devil's advocate, right, and just creating a conversation around this is, you don't know when that alarm's at 10, and then all of a sudden it jumps up to 300, right? Because we talked about changing conditions rather quickly, and that's a problem, right? So the recommendations that were given up were up here were, hey, if your instrument goes into alarm at all, you need to get out of Dodge, and I agree with that. I'm not going to disagree with that one bit. With the more expensive instruments, this one, the Radius, you could program in what's called an acknowledgeable alarm level. So at 10, this instrument could go into alarm, but it could be silenced for 30 minutes. If it ever creeps above the next alarm threshold, which could be a 20, for example, it would then go on alarm and it can't be silenced. So you mitigate that nuisance alarm, but you're still made aware that there's gas present, right? And that's some of the features that are built into the more expensive devices, because I'm sitting here looking at you guys, look at me, and your eyes are going, ugh, and you're going, why would I spend more money on a gas detector, right? Well, time is money, and if you're stopping work every 5 seconds because your gas detector is going into alarm and you're not trusting it because it's always going into alarm, does it have any value? No, right? So again, that's one of the tools that are built into the more advanced devices, is that acknowledgeable alarm level, right? Any other questions with regards to alarm set points? Again, it's not contrary to what these guys are telling you. You should definitely get out of Dodge if it gets over 20. That's for darn sure. Yeah.
I'll acknowledge that when we were on site last fall, one of the monitors that we were using was a 4-gas monitor, and it was not this brand, it was a different brand, the MSA brand, and it was going off frequently because, you know, we had it pretty close to the pit opening, and we weren't even able to get a full day's use out of it because the levels were above 10 parts per million, and we decided conscientiously that we were going to raise the set points because we had another monitor that was still available and showing things, but this one was just really going off a lot because it was doing the 8-hour accumulation, it was doing the real time, it was just constantly annoying me. So we did reset that alarm knowing that moving the set point from 10 to 25, you know, we didn't move it up to 100 or anything like that.
No, and I'm not suggesting that either. Yeah.
We did do just what you were talking about, Steve, which was to shift it slightly, but I wouldn't say, oh, you guys go buy a monitor and then change the alarm point.
Yeah.
I mean, we discussed, should we do this, and knowing why we were doing it, and that we had, these guys were still wearing personal monitors that were going off at 10, and they just were one we had in some area close to the pit would quiet down a little bit, so.
The-
There's reasons that you would want to do it, and I think the biggest thing is I wouldn't want somebody that had a monitor that didn't give the readout, parts per million. I don't even know if there are the monitors you can.
Multi-gas instruments typically will always give a readout, just so you're aware. They don't make, or I've not seen one available in the marketplace that will not give you a rate. Single gases will, the lower cost single gases will. Those devices also use different sensing technology. The really inexpensive ones, they use different sensing technology, closer to solid state sensor technology, which is not as fast to respond and not as accurate. So that's why your CO detector in your house that you have on the ceiling is different than these, because they work a lot differently, right? They both detect CO, but this is night and day different than that. The technology is different. But I would agree with what you're saying. You don't want to arbitrarily just set your alarms different. The feature that I was talking about lets you keep that low-level alarm at 10, lets you silence it, but if it gets above 20, now OSHA's alarm set points for H2S exposure is 10 for a low alarm and 20 for a high alarm. And they say if it ever gets past 20, you got to get out of Dodge, right? So you could still keep in line with that OSHA recommendation, but use that acknowledgeable alarm level to silence the 11, the 12, right? Because I look at it like this. At that point, if your instrument's always an alarm, you're better off using nothing. Because if you're going to ignore it, what's the point? Why bother? Just assume that you know it's a waste of time, right? So it's that whole trade-off between being as safe and conscientious as possible and being able to get your work done. And I think a feature like that really gives you the ability to be educated and compromised to get the work done in a safe manner. So I'm not telling you to stay in gases above 20 ppm. I'm saying that you could set this to 9 or 8 or 10 and be able to silence it. And then, but if it ever creeps above 20, the instrument will go alarm and won't come back out until you get below that alarm threshold. Yeah.
Jim, I got a question for you, and actually this is more for the whole group.
Okay.
And Steve, your question is a lot kind of like what I was trying to get at. Like, okay, this is not the magic bullet because you've got all these other concerns potentially. I don't know, Diane, you or somebody was talking about how you guys were monitoring out in the field as you're spreading.
Steve was talking
Steve,
about.
and you're seeing, did you say you were seeing 50 out there?
Actually, Dave's neighbor
Okay.
was out in the field after a load had been spread wide open field.
Yeah.
Wind, it was plenty of wind.
With wind.
And actually, you won't believe it, but that's a picture of 151.
Wow.
Yeah.
After it had been spread.
And so
Yeah.
my question for all you guys is like, I mean, I'm not super experienced with spread. I've never been like a commercial applicator or anything like that. But that's really high. So is this stuff getting more because of the distiller's products or some other factor? Because to me, 151 out in an open field, it's definitely doesn't that
That's
just
crazy.
seem like crazy high?
It seems high, but I haven't been out in the field with them
Yeah.
either. But
Yeah, I'm
our
not
guys
questioning it. I'm just like, what's going on here?
We have commercial applicators who are using monitors, a variety of different brands, who have said that they're getting levels over 50 out in the field.
Out in the
too.
field.
Wow.
Wow.
Yep.
That's crazy.
But
Yeah.
maybe it's crazy because nobody's monitored it, and it's been like that.
Yeah,
But we
it's
just
just-
are now starting to get data on it. I don't know, but I do think
I mean, that's also like a really irritating, like that's not a pleasant level to feel.
Yeah.
Like,
I've been in steel mills where workers are being exposed to 900 parts per million all day, every day. And I asked them, I go, so when you go home and you got that headache, it's carbon monoxide, so it's different. It's not quite as acute. And I said, you have a headache? Yeah. Does it not go away no matter how much beer you drink? Yep. So that's carbon monoxide exposure, right? It's become their norm, right? And that's what we're trying to educate against is we don't want this to become your norm because the nuances between life and death are so slim, and it's not like, hey, you lost a finger. It's the ramifications are very high.
But those
Right.
of you guys who have been doing this for 10, 15 years, No, I just mean from the odor and from other things you might pick up.
The thing.
I'm sorry, we had guys at our community meeting last fall that showed up that said, it stinks more than ever in some scenarios, and they were asking the extension people about, is it because of the pH changes? Yeah, and what kind of stuff is going in. But they also reported, yeah, we get headaches when we're standing here, and we feel a little sick to our stomach, that's kind of normal. Having a headache while you're pumping or applying, that's the way it is.
Yeah. The that's wild. I think that's wild. Yeah. Next question.
Well, I was just going to make the comment in that our distillers' grains and the other products have changed dramatically over the last number of years. There's all sorts of different processes out there. And yes, I have been seeing higher sulfur content in manures that I have my farmers test from time to time. So that has been going up. I cannot say that it is directly related to that because I've not done that in-depth analysis, but it has been gradually going up. And lots of farmers have been using more of a distillers or a bypass type of feed because of some of the economics involved with it. And so I think that's something that, yes, certainly some research could go into because we have different products now than what all the ballpark nutrient analysis said in the past.
So the next question I was hoping you guys would have would be, well, gee, will this really work at my farm? So I wanted to show you some pictorials to give you some perspective. This is U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh. It's their facility. These little squares at the bottom here are rail cars full of coal. And you can see how far these things will transmit given those distances. So that's what 1,000 feet looks like. Again, you raise it to table height, 1,800 feet. The next application, well, gee, I got a metal-sided barn. If I have this device on one side of the barn and I'm on the other, or my son's on the other and he's wearing one of your devices, will it work? The answer is yes. These devices are built off of battlefield technology, so it's a mesh network. It's the same type of radio that the Special Forces guys use on the battlefield. So it's designed to be extra robust and communicate through things. In this scenario, you could see how big these storage tanks were, and you could see how big the rail cars were. 2 of these 3 tanks were filled with water, and it was still able to communicate through the tanks to the device on the other side. So it's a very robust platform for you. Designed for heavy industry, designed for a lot of interference that's going on. So something to consider. There's a whole bunch of tools that are out there to help you maintain these devices. There's docking cradles. There's programs that help you where we'll come in and swap out an instrument if it breaks on you. But know that all of these things can be calibrated by hand. You don't need all these expensive, crazy tools. All you really need is a gas detector and a bottle of gas and the right type of regulator and some know-how. But all these are out there. Right? So if you're using gas detectors day in and day out, yeah, you might want to invest in one of these tools. If you're using it 6 times a year and it's no longer feasible to rent, you can buy one and do the maintenance by hand. If you're using it day in and day out, yeah, it's different. If you're using it once a year, you definitely want to rent one, right? So I'm going to skip by all this stuff because it's not very interesting. We do rent these devices. You could get them from anywhere, as I mentioned earlier. These are all the distributors that I can think of in the state of Wisconsin that have access to this type of equipment. Vallon used to be called Hagemeyer. They changed their name. Right? Do I recommend using Granger? No. Those guys are not experts at gas detection. I'd rather recommend you guys go with somebody like Harman or Vorpal or Connie or Vallon, but I would not recommend Granger. Yeah? The pricing is going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to shop around. But I'd say that if you call your local safety supplier, you're going to get a reasonable price. Understand the service that they're providing you, because you could just go buy a gas detector from Grainger, whether it's mine or anybody else's. But all you're going to get is that Amazon experience where it shows up on your doorstep and nobody's helped you out, okay? There's video to help you guys understand how to use these things. You go to my company's website, you go to my competitor's website, you go to YouTube and see video on how to maintain these devices. But that's different than somebody sitting down with you and really walking you through it and helping you understand. Yeah, the more reputable ones have certified people. Like Argus Hasco, they have actual service techs that drive around, and they're, do you guys drive around anymore? I think they drive around. They drive around, so there you go. And those guys have been trained at the factories of the manufacturers that they represent. Same thing with like Vorpal. I'm not so sure about Valen, and I'm not so sure about Connie. The only reason I mentioned Connie is they're located in Madison and they're fairly close, you know. But they're a telehouse distributor. They're more knowledgeable than a Grainger, though, right? So it does matter what you buy, and it matters where you buy it with this stuff. You wouldn't buy a tractor from Grainger, would you? I'd hope not. Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, it helps justify year-round, does this technology allow for monitoring of air quality environment with not agitation and not just application? Can it help with just the daily sample?
Sure. So, you know, they talked about other confined spaces and other applications. Any trench that's deeper than 4 foot is considered a confined space. Understanding you guys are not regulated by OSHA, but I believe you might be the Department of Labor, and they use OSHA recommendations. So any trench deeper than 4 foot is considered a confined space. Any grain silo is considered a confined space, right? There's all sorts of hazards. There's gas hazards in those confined spaces. There's engulfment, right? If you're in one of those confined spaces and you're stuck in grain, you can't get out, and nobody is there working as a partner, if you have a panic button on you, at least this thing's going to scream louder than you will for longer, you'd hope. And if it's connected wirelessly with another device, right? One of the things I didn't show you is...
Not even the benefit to the human wearing devices for the herd. Is there something that you use it as a monitoring tool if the herd is doing that?
That's a great application. So yeah, I didn't...
The radius cones that we were kind of talking and leaning towards.
Yeah, I didn't think about that application.
Your manure pit area, they can tell you when there's an area that is high. And if you have cattle in that area, you stop your agitation and you can let it air out, get those cattle out of there.
You're correct. So I did not think of that application. Thank you for thinking of that. Yeah, you could leave this in that area for 7 days while you're doing that work, up to 7 days while you're doing that work, and it'll constantly monitor 24/7, and you'll hear it. And if you have one by your house, even if you're in bed and the gas levels rise, you'll hear one of them, right? So you can.
What might one of those rent for?
They're a little more pricey. I believe like a month is like $900. Yeah. Carmen worked it all up, didn't you?
Yeah.
There you go. She worked it all up.
A month.
Yeah, but that's with the integral pump. Roughly $1,000 for a month of rental. It's for one. Yeah. One device. What's that? It depends on the hazard, right? So
Depends on each person's setup.
correct. And that's what I was saying it differently. It depends on everybody's setup. So it depends on the configuration of how you're storing that manure, right? And a great example is that opening in the floor where somebody could fall in, right? You probably want to place this by that opening. You really don't care 30 feet away from that opening because that's where the H2S is emitting from, right? So it's using, what's that? Well, the H2S is always going to emit from that hole where it's being agitated out of.
The gases are coming through the flat underneath the floor. Through the floor.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. But most of the H2S is going to emit from wherever that pump head is that you were talking about earlier, right?
So we plan on doing some testing
Potentially.
with the farm, with the radius, this spring and some manure haulers and try to demo it out and make some videos and see how it works in the farming scenario. It's been used quite a bit in the petroleum fields and other fields.
Yeah, so it's been this was actually field trialed in oil and gas fields, in chemical plants, refineries, steel mills. So pretty harsh applications with guys not being so gentle. A lot of electromagnetic interference from big heavy magnets and running engines and that sort of thing. Very dirty environments, dirtier than your environment, believe it or not. But if you've never been to a steel mill, you probably won't believe me. But yeah, they're pretty gnarly environments. Yeah. So, any other questions? Yeah.
As far as with the smaller detectors
Mm-hmm.
and such, roughly at what distance above the ground does it matter as far as with the detection? Because again, it's all by normal.
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. So there's what was described earlier was gas stratification. So left in an undisturbed environment, hydrogen sulfide will pool down by the floor. When you're using a personal device like that, like the Tango, you're really concerned about what you're breathing in. So it depends on the atmospheric conditions, the pressure, the temperature, the relative humidity. You try to limit, you try not to worry about any of that stuff and just say, hey, what am I being exposed to? Because I'm what matters, right? I don't know if I answered your question, but it's a very hard question to answer. It's too many moving parts to answer that question appropriately. Yeah. Any other questions or concerns or points? Yep.
Now, the average Joe in here probably pumps and dips in the spring and fall.
Okay.
What would you recommend just
Rental.
and what?
So Carmen's gonna talk yet too on other monitors. Jim is just for industrial science rep, and we had him come in because mainly of the radius to talk about those. So Carmen's gonna quick talk about a few other monitors, and we can kind of make a recommendation what would work the best for your situation.
Yeah.